For 2 weeks only, buy the Zombie Chronicles poster pack. A link is down below. Welcome to another wonderful episode of A Deeper Dive. This is a series where we take a topic suggested by you guys and make as thorough a dive into it as possible. We will explore every asset of it, and I will give you guys all the details on that topic. The way this series works is you guys suggest an idea down in the comments below, something for me to cover. If you see somebody has already suggested a good idea and you think it would be a good idea to talk about, give them a thumbs up. And then, when I go to make a new one, I will look through the comments and I will find the best comment that has a good number of thumbs up. Either way, you may be in the next episode of A Deeper Dive. Today we have a comment from Red who says, "A deeper dive, the Blundergat and its origins, who created it, and all of that good stuff." I thought this could be an interesting topic to discuss because a bit of zombies lore and zombies history surrounding Mob of the Dead has been lost. Back when Mob of the Dead was first revealed, they actually had a video live streamed at the end of their Call of Duty Championship, and this kind of announced Mob of the Dead. It was a huge announcement at the time. However, things were different back then. People weren't exactly live streaming live streams to get their live reaction. That wasn't something that really happened as much, and people weren't recording it either. I'm sure people were, but finding versions of that recording are very difficult to find. I could actually find one copy of the original live stream. It does have a reaction over to it, and it's not very good quality. I'll put a link to it down below. It's really interesting, but we start to get into a bit of the backstory behind Mob of the Dead from that live stream, and specifically the Blundergat and where it came from. So if you'd like to check that out, I'll put a link in the description. Let's, before we get into the Blundergat though, get into the history behind Mob of the Dead, our characters, how they came to be, and how they got to prison together. We have to start with July 18th, 1922. Salvador Sal DeLuca opens a gambling houses across Chicago. This marks the beginning of the DeLuca crime family. Sal is essentially a mob boss in Chicago. He is the leader of this organized crime ring. And you'll see many people within the Mob of the Dead crew start to work under him. For example, Billy Handsome joins the DeLuca crime family as a hitman. Sal will come to look at Billy as a son he never had. Sal is a family man. You can see this in his conversations with Stanley Ferguson. He actually takes joy in hearing news about Stanley Ferguson's son. He's a family man, and this is why he comes to look at somebody like Billy Handsome as a son he never had. Then we move on to September 18th, 1923. An expert in gambling and rigging sporting events, Michael Finn O'Leary begins working for Sal. Sal and Finn are running a gambling ring, and it would only make sense that they'd also be gambling on sporting events. Finn is an expert in this. This is why Stanley Ferguson actually comes to him for advice while in prison for different bets and who to gamble on. Things unfortunately start to take a bad turn for Sal and his organized crime. We learn on March 1st, 1929, Sal writes of his frustrations with Chicago's finest. After many years of successful bribes within the city, it becomes clear that this is no longer an option. We actually see this expressed in one of the Mob of the Dead Hill ciphers. When you solve this cipher, you get this bit of a letter written by Sal DeLuca. While I realize that the current lack of cooperation from Chicago's finest leaves us at somewhat of a disadvantage, I find your latest report extremely troubling. The alliance that exists between our outfit and the North Side gangs must be sustained, lest we face the reap of February 19th, 1929. So, that is what's going on here. We start to see a bit of Sal's empire crumble as other gangs and other organized crime rings within Chicago kind of fight over territory, and they're losing the support of the police, which makes it very difficult. You can't really bribe them and have them look the other way anymore. Now, one of the things they do is start to turn towards heists, and Sal begins working with Albert Arlington. We learn May 11th, 1930. Sal begins to work with Albert Arlington, an associate in Los Angeles known for being a master schemer and bank robber. So they've turned away from gambling and now are working with Albert Arlington to do all sorts of different heists. And this is when our group finally comes together, and we have all 4 of our Mob of the Dead characters working within the DeLuca crime family. Things unfortunately go wrong for our characters, and if you can imagine, because they all end up in prison, Sal's crime ring and empire has to eventually fall apart. The first crumble begins October 11th, 1931. After an LA heist for Sal goes wrong, Al wakes up in the hospital. So Al had attempted this crime heist, it goes wrong, he ends up getting injured, and then after he leaves the hospital, he is arrested for that heist. The next bit happens November 11th, 1931, about a month later. Angry and frustrated with his collapsing empire, Sal kills a prostitute. No longer willing to turn a blind eye, the Chicago police arrest him. And remember, we learned about the Chicago police not willing to turn a blind eye from that Hill cipher. The next person to go down is Billy Handsome. In an operation against the DeLuca crime family, Billy is arrested for multiple homicides. Being their hitman, he saw this coming as the empire was collapsing. There was nothing he could do to get away from it, and the final person to fall in the empire is Finn O'Leary. In an operation against the DeLuca crime family, Finn is arrested by the Chicago PD when his wife offers evidence against him. Now, one of the things we learn in the Mob of the Dead ciphers is that Finn O'Leary and his wife are beginning to have a fallout and actually are going to end up divorcing. We learn in the cipher the answer is simple: no divorce. No matter what ideas Angela may have about making a new life, she needs to understand it's not going to happen. I didn't pluck her pretty little tush from the chorus line of obscurity so she can turn around and screw me as soon as times get tough. No divorce. She can leave this marriage the day she leaves the earth. And because he would not allow her to divorce, she probably offers up evidence to the Chicago police, which is what allows Finn to go down. And now all four of our characters have been arrested, and this is how they end up at Mob of the Dead. And I'm sure you guys know the rest. They end up making an escape plan, but does not go accordingly, and then they all murder Albert Arlington on the roof. The rest get electrocuted for that murder, and then they all end up in Mob of the Dead. We all know that story. Now, what about the blunderbuss? Because this is what initially inspired this video. Well, remember that Treyarch livestream I told you guys about? One of the first things that livestream did was detail a bit of the history behind our characters, and we learned for the first time who they were and what they were like. Unfortunately, most of the information was lost as that livestream ended up being lost to history, and we learned a lot about it from the timeline, and that's what kind of allows us to repiece this story. We do still have a copy of it, and like I said, you guys can find it in the description, but this is the only copy I could find of it, and unfortunately the timeline doesn't go into detail about the blunderbuss, while the video does. So what's going on with this shotgun? Well, Jason Blundell explains that they wanted to have this weapon in the map because they wanted to tell a story about the Warden being somebody who collected Civil War weapons, and I know this kind of sounds random, but if you think about it, it actually fits in well with Alcatraz's history. Before it became a prison, it was actually a fort used by the US military, and during the Civil War, there was a massive arming of the island. There was a large influx of cannons that were sent over, and the island was also used to hold Confederate sympathizers and imprison them. So the fort, while on the opposite end of the country, did still actually have a role in the Civil War, howbeit a very minor role. So that's what was going on there, and I guess they wanted to reference that Civil War history by including the blunderbuss shotgun into the map. So the backstory behind the Blundergat within this map is basically that it was a weapon used in the Civil War, and the warden of the prison had collected Civil War antiques and Civil War weapons, and that's why when you're completing the Easter egg, you can actually find the Blundergat within his office. It's a nod to the fact that the weapon belonged to him. That is the backstory to Mob of the Dead. Everything we know about the characters and everything we know about the blunderbuss shotgun. Part of it plays into this idea of organized crime and mob bosses, while other bits of it actually play into the history of the island of Alcatraz itself. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it interesting. If you did, maybe give it a like, possibly subscribe for more, and if you have any ideas for future episodes, go ahead and leave them down below, and if anybody has suggested your ideas, give them a like. And I want to quickly mention before the video ends that there are only a couple more days left to get the Zombie Saga poster, so if you'd like, a link to them is also in the description. I'm gonna go, have a wonderful day, and bye.